In a previous video that I did about UFOs, sort of went down a bit of a rabbit hole of like the paranormal. You know, I came across all these different things. One of those things were skyfish. And I tell you what, it did trigger a deep memory inside my brain about these, you know, these programs on the History Channel like Ancient Aliens, where they delve into these like paranormal stuff.
How can angels have sex?
You know, you got these over enthusiastic presenters, these hyper edited like audio stings, that sort of thing. That was their bread and butter. But I distinctly remember an episode. It probably wasn't Ancient Aliens, but I remember an episode of some show or other dedicated to skyfish, or they also call them rods or other things like that. I mean, the History Channel was just filled with like stuff like that, or stuff like porn stars. I don't remember the History Channel doing much about like, you know, actual history, but I couldn't find the episode. But this was the clip that it was showing. It's showing these people base jumping off into a canyon. As the camera follows them, we see these streaks dart across the frame. These are what is known as skyfish. But what are skyfish? Are they like a bird-fish hybrid? Are they flying fish? Are they aliens? The what is known as a cryptid, basically like an animal or a creature that people believe are out there. You know, sort of like, you know, think Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, or Chupacabra. And the study of cryptids is called cryptozoology, which has nothing to do with that Logan Paul scam. I mean, some of this footage doesn't really give us a good sense of scale. That they could be as small as a grain of sand or as large as a tennis ball. Now, while we can clearly see them in the footage, a lot of people have recorded this, have said that they saw no such streaks with the naked eye. And that sort of has an air of possibility to it. I mean, cameras can detect things that our human eyes can't see. An example being the infrared light emitted by our TV remotes. And if we look at screen grab, we see their rod shape, which what seems to be several pairs of wings. And it almost looks like a piece of barbed wire or muffling pasta. Some people say that they're aliens. Other people say that they're extra-dimensional beings that the cameras just happen to be able to see, but we can't. Now, on the topic of what cameras can see and how it's different to how our eyes can see, let's talk about shutter speed. Changing the shutter speed does two things. A, it changes the exposure of an image, and B, it changes the motion blur. This camera right here has a shutter speed of 1/50th. Now you're watching this footage at 25 frames a second. That means the shutter speed is twice the speed as the frame rate. The reason being is that's the typical shutter that we tend to see in like film and modern day TV, how it mimics the motion blur that we see in real life. If we increase the shutter speed, things will appear less blurry. If we decrease the shutter speed, things will appear more blurry. Now, when it comes to skyfish, the majority of footage I've seen is taken at night where it's dark. And if you've got auto settings, one of the settings it would want to change is shutter speed, as that affects the exposure. And to let more light hit the sensor, it's going to have to slow down the shutter speed, therefore creating more motion blur. And I have to ask, like, are these actually rod shaped? Because what I mean by that, with the slower shutter speed, we know motion blur is going to be exaggerated. So what's to say this isn't just a singular point? If it's a singular point, then regardless how long the shutter speed is open for, the streaks will not overlap going from frame to frame. What would happen is the point flying through the air would get exposed to the sensor for however long the shutter is open for. Then the shutter will close with that particular frame being exposed and therefore becoming part of the footage. While the shutter is closed, the object is still moving. By the time the camera is ready to expose the next frame, the object has moved past where it was in the previous frame. Rinse and repeat. If they were rod shaped, then the streaks would appear to overlap going from frame to frame. And looking at a lot of this footage, we aren't seeing this rod shape overlap on itself. So I think it's safe to say that these rods aren't actually rod shapes, they just appear that way. Instead they're just like they are like a point, almost like the size of a raisin. But what does this mean? Now, are they some sort of government drone being sent to spy on us? Are they some previously undiscovered creature living among us? Or are they robots sent by aliens to study us from afar? No, they're just bugs. They're just insects, bees, moths, flies, what? I can show you what, I can show you. Okay, so this is some footage I recorded earlier, and we've got the garden lights on to see if we can attract any. Shutter is set to 1/25th, which is the longest I can go at my current frame rate. I set up my camera and waited for a bit. Well, there's one, and another. Oh, a big one there. So we saw a few moths, but are these really skyfish? It does seem to be similar to the other footage I found of alleged skyfish. They even make the same morphaldine pasta shape. But why is that? Like we were saying about shutter speed before, any movement that is made during the time that the shutter is open will render that object a blur in the frame. Not only does that include the movement of said object, but any movement within that object. And the thing that is moving a lot with moths and other insects are their wings. So what we're essentially seeing here is that the flap of the wing, where that's going up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, which is creating that sort of like barbed wire sort of look, almost like a corkscrew. And some of them they look, but yeah, that's all it is. According to the Sussex Wildlife Trust, the hummingbird hawk moth beats its wings 70 to 80 times a second. Now, I'm not a moth expert, like this could be another type of moth. I mean, if you're a moth expert, please let me know down below what type of moth this is likely to be. But I imagine that similar moths in a similar environment would beat their wings similarly. So each frame of my footage was exposed for 1/25th of a second, or 0.04 seconds. If we do 75 times 0.04, we get 3. And if we look carefully at the footage, we can see 3 individual wing beats. A lot of these sightings of skyfish tend to happen at night. This is for probably a couple of reasons. A, insects like moths are nocturnal, so they tend to come out a lot more at night. And you bring a light source out at night, oh yeah, moths love that, don't they? And not only the longer shutter speed makes them easier to see at night, but you also have the contrast of the light source that you're bringing out there to see, lighting up the insects, in contrast with the darker background. They may appear during the day, they're just harder to see. The clip I've shown you with the base jumpers before, that was shot during the day. There's a contrast of the insect being lit by the sun and with the cliff in shadow that really brings it out. We can see by the footage that the insects and the plants, both lit by the sun, appears to be the same brightness. Even in a lot of cryptozoology circles, skyfish are seen as an optical illusion. Basically the mechanism of the camera rendering something weirdly, and people come across it and say, hey look at this thing, isn't it weird? And I don't really want to come across like I'm mocking these people. No, I really don't. I think weird things in this world should be identified and investigated. I think that's great. But saying they're aliens or extra-dimensional beings, I think not. Occam's razor is usually defined as the simplest explanation is always the best. But what it really means is the conclusion with the fewest assumptions is usually the best. And saying that they are extra-dimensional beings is one big assumption. But hey, what do you think? Like, are they moths? Are they aliens? Have you personally seen a skyfish? Like, if you have anything to say, please let me know. I like to have a look at this sort of stuff. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you like what you see, please subscribe, and I'll see you later.